Hello again, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our podcast aims to provide distinctive perspectives and concepts for building leadership capacity to meet the challenges of a volatile and uncertain future. I am Dr. John Dentico, your host. What are the characteristics of a high-performing team, and how important is trust to the operations of that team? What is values-based alignment, and is it critical to the functioning of all members of a team? Why is it so important to have constructive criticism be part of a team's normal operations? If the answers to these questions interest you, then I am confident that my conversation with Mr. Steve Morris, designer of multimillion-dollar yachts and a coach of high-performing sailing and work teams, will be thought-provoking and compelling. So let's get started. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Hello again. Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host. Today, my guest is Mr. Steve Morris. Steve started his career designing multi-million-dollar racing yachts, building and coaching high-performance teams, and helping his clients win the world's most demanding yacht races. Steve transitioned his career to that of a certified project management professional program manager, helping the U.S. Navy launch ships into the fleet. 8 years ago, Steve started his own business to help owners build better lives by building better businesses, getting unstuck, fueling growth, achieving more profit, and having more fun with their crews. Steve is an avid learner and practitioner of breathwork, hiking, yoga, and meditation as he journeys on the path to the centenarian Olympics. I am pleased to have him here with me today. Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, John. Thanks so much for having me today. This is awesome.
I appreciate you being here. Steve, I'd like to open our discussion today by asking you a particular question. And the question is, what would you say are the characteristics of a high-performing team?
Yeah, this is a really good question, John. So I experienced this firsthand with some of the teams that I work with, not all of them, right? So I was able to see that early on in my career. The feeling that I had when we were working as a high-performing team was just a sense when you're with a group of people that you're in a safe space, you're in a place where everybody's got each other's backs, and you're all there for the same reason, like for the same goal. And I really felt like those teams, when I was out sailing with them, people know what their roles are on the team. They know what they're accountable for, and they're working on that. And they're also coming in and helping each other, right? That's that aspect of having each other's backs, is when somebody's on the back foot, then others are coming in and helping. And it's the opposite of an environment where somebody's saying, that's not my job, I'm not going to do it, right? In a high-performing team, people are very results and goal-oriented, but working together in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. Steve, let me follow that up here, piggyback on that. In the sense of a high-performing team, how important do you think trust is to that team?
Trust is absolutely foundational, John. It's the bedrock on which everything else gets built. And particularly, as Patrick Lencioni talks about, this vulnerability-based trust. And that's not just like a transactional trust that I trust that somebody's going to send the email, but really a trust like I can come in to this group and I can raise my hand and I can say, hey, I need help. Something I'm confused about here. And you have a trust and a sense of safety with that team that you can be vulnerable.
I agree. I think it's the bedrock, as you said, of everything. Without it, you have no relationships, you have nothing, really. Yeah. Let me ask you this. If you were to put yourself into the position of a person looking for a high-performing team, what do you think that person is looking for? What makes them want to say, I want to be here with these people?
You mean in terms of somebody coming and joining a high performing? Yeah. So a lot of what I do in my work now is providing a foundation for that through talking about core values and like who are we as a team? Like what's the culture of the team? And certainly in my past, I felt at times I've come into a group of people and feeling like I'm in the right place, versus other times when I haven't felt like I've been on that team, that there's a mismatch. And I didn't really understand why at the time, to be frank. I just, as an engineer and working on these teams, I could just tell the difference in the feel. But now I've got the tools. And now this is what I help my clients do, is start off by defining, like, what are your core values? What are your simple set of guiding principles that defines who you guys are as a team? What do you value as a team? And then talking about that, so it's not just, and living it, so it's not just on the wall, but operationalizing that into how the team operates, and then being able to attract people into that team by saying, this is who we are. This is who we are as a group of people. How do you see yourself coming and joining us as a team? To be able to talk about what the group values, and to, in that process, to be able to see somebody joining the team, do they want to share in those values? Do they want to be a part of that? Or do those values scare them? And it works both ways. You can attract people into the team, and you can also repel the people you don't want to come join the team.
Traditionally, when you talk about things like a leader, collaborator, partner, follower relationship, there's this idea that it's, and we accept this, that it's important for the people to trust the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also important for the leader to trust the people in the group. But sailing, having a bit of experience in that area, when you're talking about a high performance team, it's also, from my perspective, this notion of mutual trust. And
Mm-hmm.
mutual trust for me is that every member of that team has to trust one another. How do you feel about that?
No, absolutely. And I think this is alluding to what I was talking about before, which is this idea of, we've got a group of people on a boat together. Are we all here for the same reason? Are we all sailing in the same direction? And I feel like at times, like some of these high performing teams I was on, there was a very talented group of people had been pulled together and put in on a room, or in a boat. And ultimately, that just didn't mean that everybody was going to work together just because they've been picked as the top shelf, top athletes. And I think this comes up, we see it probably every Sunday on sports on TV. This idea of getting highly paid, very talented people doesn't mean that they all operate together as a team. And really being able to create that environment and then find those people who are there for the same reasons is absolutely critical.
I agree. Let me ask you this next question here. How would you describe the interplay of a high performing team and leadership? In other words, what would you say is the job of leadership within a high performing team, let's say?
Yeah. Well, I think this, once as you are working on establishing this vulnerability based trust in the team, then what we really need to happen next is to have some healthy debate happening. And people use the word conflict, but conflict has a lot of different connotations. But you need to have some conflict. You need to have some debate. And because people need to be heard. If you're just doing top-down leadership, maybe from 30 years ago style, that doesn't work so much anymore. And it's limiting. So we want to be able to have people come and voice their opinions, bring that to the table. We want to have healthy debate. And I've worked with some teams on occasion where I've really seen nobody's talking about stuff here, important stuff. Nobody's like weighing in with some passion about what we should be doing or where we should be going and what's getting in our way, and all of that. And so I have some curiosity about why don't we have that debate? And typically, usually it comes out that we don't have an environment that being driven by the leadership that's allowing that to happen. If somebody's shooting ideas down, say, that's a ridiculous idea. No, we're not doing that. then everybody's going to cross their arms, lean back, and say, that's the last thing I'm ever going to say in a meeting. And if we've got that environment, I don't think we're going to achieve where we want to go as a team.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think certainly in the model of leadership that I have been dealing with for the past 30 years, one of the major requirements is safety. And you mentioned safety before. Say what's on your mind, being able to say you disagree. I mean, you can do it respectfully, and we're not here to scream and holler at people, so to speak, but say, hey, listen, I just don't think this is going to work, and be able to say what's on your mind and truly contribute. My model's based on contribution. What do you got? What can you do to help us achieve our mission? So I think you're right on the money. And secondly, let me just reflect back just for a minute on your notion of values. Everything I see coming across my desk, everything. The number one requirement of people in the new normal of everyday life today is an alignment of values with the organization they're working for. So I think you're right on the money in terms of we're going down this path together, in a sense that we're looking and saying, hey, we're recognizing that these things are so important for people to really stand up and be part of what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. And maybe we'll be being a bit redundant here, but that's okay. Now we have this world, this new normal of everyday life in the wake of the COVID pandemic. How do you think the world has changed? And what does that mean for leadership and the concept of leadership and creating, in your words, these high-performing teams?
That's a very good question. I reflect a lot and think about where life is now and my interactions, both with my clients and other people that I meet with and talk with in the community. And I have this sense that there's like a psychological distress, if you like. I'm going to go a little dark here. I just feel like people are tapped out, exhausted mentally and emotionally. And it's hard. And so where this shows up in the workplace is I think it's a harder balance now for leaders to really bring the team in and keep them focused on the right things, but also to provide an environment that helps people. People are looking for flexibility, for example. And this is one of the big things about trying to balance life at home versus life at work, and daycare gets canceled because somebody's tested positive for COVID or something, then you got to work with it, right? And provide some flexibility. But at the same time, we've got some results that we still have to achieve in the business. And I just see that there's a tension in there, balance or tension that's exhausting people. And so I worry about that. And I see that, and really what I work on with my clients is telling them to take a break, not a vacation break, but take what we call as a clarity break, which is to just go sit down in a coffee shop somewhere with a sheet of paper and just see what's coming up, what's working, what's not working. Have some time to reflect about what's going on, to guide yourself, to give yourself confidence that you're doing the right things, that you're thinking about things, but also to bolster how you're feeling about life and what are the things that you need to be doing maybe. So a lot in there, I'm sorry, but
No,
that's
great.
what I'm seeing.
Yeah, part of my practice is in the area of strategic thinking. And I agree with you. I don't know. And the way I differentiate the difference is strategic planning is looking for answers to questions. And strategic thinking is about making sure you're asking yourself the right questions.
Yeah, good.
You know what I mean? So I agree with you. I don't know how many times or how much people take a step back, take a breath, as you say, reflect, and ask themselves the right questions. Take the opportunity to do that.
If you've got your head down running like heck in the business all the time, then you're set up in a very reactionary mode, and that's exhausting, right? And so to be more strategic, to ask yourself the right questions, as you're saying, I think then people can take a step back and figure out like, oh, okay, we're actually not on the right course here. we got to do a course correction. Or something's changed about how the environment is, our business, our clients, and we need to make a course correction. But you can't see that when you're down in the weeds all the time.
I agree. Have you, in your experience, and no names here, we don't want any names, have you run into or been an observer of, let's say, a toxic environment?
Absolutely, yes. This is looking back at some of the teams that I've been on. Once again, not all of them, but just teams where people are getting shut down, where people are bringing ideas, and those just get dismissed for reasons that are not apparent, right? There's something going on behind the scenes. And we talk a lot in the work that I do about just open and honest discussion. We want to get away from politics. And I'm lucky because most of, and actually all of the clients that I work with are smaller, mid-sized businesses. So we can really work to make sure that we're getting rid of politics out of the group dynamic. But in larger environments and some that I've worked in the past, there's been some other hidden decision-making path that has really not served the team well ultimately. And as I was saying before, really trying to figure out, like, why did somebody make that decision? Was it for the greater good of the team, or was it for them? When that starts coming up, then I don't think we're on a good path.
I agree. Let me ask you this question, because this is another question that comes up every once in a while in the things that I run into, and that is, you have these hybrid work teams now. You got some maybe doing, let's just say 50%, 50% at home, 50% at a what I call a brick and mortar place.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any hindrances per se for a hybrid team to be a high performing team, let's say?
I don't think that should get in the way, but I feel like there needs to be some structure and environment to really make sure that we don't run off the rails with a hybrid team. So a lot of what we do in EOS is talk about running a business on data. And we're talking about people and feelings, but there's still data, right? And so agreeing as a team on here are our goals, and we work in EOS on a quarterly basis. So we're saying, what do we need to get done? What are our priorities for the next quarter? Okay, got it. Then now, what do we need to get done on a weekly basis to be able to make sure that we're on the right path for getting those goals met? And so we put a scorecard in place with the leadership teams that I work with. And on that scorecard, weekly activity-based measurables. What do we actually need to be doing to move forward? And I think if the team's hybrid or in place, but if we've all agreed on this is how we are measuring progress and this is what success looks like, I don't think it really matters where the work gets done. But if we're looking at that scorecard and things aren't getting done, the goals aren't getting met, then we can have some curiosity about that and try to lean in and figure out, okay, what's happening? And if it transpires that being in and out of the office is meaning that we're not getting the cadence of communication or the pieces aren't getting joined together properly, then you're going to have to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you this question. We're going to be a bit more personal. What's the future look like for Steve Mars? Is it more of the same, or things on the horizon that are different?
So I work with leadership teams of, as I said, more small to mid-sized companies, and relating back to your question about what's changed since the pandemic, and I'm seeing this stress, and ultimately, I think leadership in businesses it's an inside job and it's an outside job. In other words, we're doing all the external things to be good leaders of companies, but also internally, leaders need to be looking at themselves and figuring out, like, what do I need to be doing with what's going on inside me? And so my big picture of what I'm working on to achieve over the next few years is I want to create a sort of a retreat center for business leadership teams to come and disconnect from the day-to-day, the chaos, reconnect with themselves and each other as a leadership team, and get grounded in terms of really what are they about. And this sort of circles all the way back to core values at the beginning. But what I see in my own journey has been the same is, it's Michael Singer talks about this in The Untethered Soul, if you've read that book. But we all have these blocks inside of us that we kind of stuff down. If you don't deal with trauma, the big traumas and little traumas in life, and you stuff all that stuff down inside, when the going gets tough and stuff starts coming at you, then these things start welling up and you get triggered and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? So anyway, the big picture is I want to be able to provide an environment where leadership teams can come and reflect on the outside and reflect on the inside, and reconnect with themselves and each other and get grounded in their business.
That's great. Fighting burnout, it's a big issue, as you said before, the stress. I have not read Singer's book, but a book that basically changed my life was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And I think, in addition to values alignment, meaning is the greatest motivation force on the planet.
Yeah.
If you can provide someone a sense of meaning from the things that they do, the work, everyday work, people want to come to work looking for meaning. Or as Joseph Campbell, the great scholar of mythology, would say, looking for the experience of being alive.
Yeah.
Which I so have connected to, that I think that if you can do that in your center, it is just a thought. If you can give people a greater sense of meaning from what they do every day, you're going to strike gold. I think in many respects. Let me ask you this, Steve. Will this be our last question for today? And if it's redundant, that's fine. The question is simply this: if you had a magic wand and could change anything in the world of work, what would that be and why?
So I think it relates back to what we we're saying before. I see so much disconnection around people's inability to have difficult conversations. And I think if I had my magic wand, not sure what the solution is, but train people with EQ training, train people on how to have difficult conversations. It's such a rarity that there's actually any sort of formal process around that. And I know it's something that I've struggled with through my life. And I spend a lot of time now just trying to figure out what those blocks are within me that stop me having difficult conversations, because it was an internal thing. So because I feel like if we can allow people or train people to be able to just have those open and honest and authentic conversations, then we can probably get rid of so much drama out of the workplace and so much disconnection, to provide this environment where people can raise a hand and say, I'm sorry, I missed it. I don't know what's going on. It's okay. Yeah, let me talk to you about what we're trying to get done here, and to be able to have a conversation around that. So that would be the thing that I'd wish for, is let's be able to have difficult conversations.
It's a great wish, and I wish you all the best. I find that if you could have a difficult conversation, in the end, it saves so much pain. People have gone around and they've skirted the issue. They've never wanted to talk about it, those kinds of things. And if you just can have an honest conversation and put it all out on the table, as I like to say, you can avoid so much pain. Steve, thank you so very much for being a guest. You've been a great guest. I appreciate your time and your effort here today. And I want to wish you all the best in the future. Thanks again. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed our talk today as well. So,
thank you. And you have a great rest of the week.